Welcome, everybody. My name is Katie Kapler, and I'm excited to have you here today to talk about how we can really focus on fostering belonging, specifically for adult, and I would say non-traditional learners, which is a lot of what we focus on, and how that sense of belonging can relate directly to improving outcomes for these individuals. So we're going to talk a little bit at a high level about some of these concepts, what community means, how we think about it. And then I'm going to dive into our platform actually, and we'll actually take a look at how InScribe is set up and how we go after some of these both challenges and opportunities. We are recording this session, so we will send that out afterward. Of course, feel free to share that with anybody else. So I mentioned I'm Katie. I'm co-founder and CEO here at InScribe. Joining me today, who many of you have already met, is Danielle Bonner. She's going to help keep us on track. She will also keep an eye on the chat for any questions that come in. So as we go through, please do not hesitate to interact with each other in the chat, but also if you have questions along the way, put them there. We will pause throughout the conversation and bring those into the discussion. And Danielle is very good at interrupting me to make sure that that happens. So we want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. And I believe in the chat as well as some of our other team members is Fred Scott. Some of you may have already heard from him. He runs our partnerships and sales organization. And so if you have questions or if you want follow-up, Fred is a great resource to go to for additional information. You may have already said this, Danielle, but in the chat, one thing to keep an eye on is Zoom will default to posting your message just to the hosts and panelists. So if you want everyone to see it, you actually have to change that in that little blue drop down. So just take a look for that. And let's go from there. So we've already started this process, but it would be great, if you haven't done it already, just put your name in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what brought you here today. If you have a specific initiative that you're working on or thing that you're curious about, please let us know, because I want to make sure that we touch on that and give our other, the other participants in the webinar an opportunity to maybe share their experiences where you could, and maybe you can learn a little bit from them as well.
Katie, I do see a couple things that I just want to share.
Oh yeah, please.
Because something crossed my mind earlier and I thought we should make sure we talk about that. We did have somebody share that they're in transfer, right? So they're working, from maybe a community college transferring to a 4 or on year degree. So maybe that's something that we touch on today. We see a lot of friends in student success, obviously adult learning as well. So please, if you're in the chat, go ahead and keep on introducing yourselves.
Well, that's awesome. And I think that's a perfect segue into this statement, sort of the why are we here? We always do a little existential introduction, but I was thinking today as we put this together, because I was looking at the, I was looking at the attendee list and the diversity of kind of titles and roles that we had attending here. And I thought it just reminded me that when we think about belonging and recognize how important belonging and connection is for our students to succeed, that it's not one person's job, that really there are opportunities and responsibilities to support this kind of initiative all across the university or the college. Everywhere from the point that the student is starting to think about interacting with you or maybe thinking about admissions, through their student success life cycle, into their academics, and even beyond as alumni. And what I love about the community model is it's so flexible that it's kind of like a single solution that you can really apply across all of these areas. So what I'm really excited to talk about and hopefully engage the audience, our attendees on a little bit today is that concept of like, how do we work together to support these initiatives, and how can a tool set help simplify that process for you, make that process more meaningful and for you and for your students. That was a bit long-winded. And I don't really need to go over the slide with this audience, I'm quite sure. But when we started InScribe, we did it because we knew that the demographics of students in the United States was changing rapidly and was changing permanently. And that we can't, when we think about a student and we sort of picture this 19-year-old living on campus in the dorm for 4 years. Absolutely, that's the experience of some learners, but it is not the experience of the vast majority of students. And so we can't simply gear our support and engagement strategies to these, quote unquote, traditional learners. We have to think outside the box. And that was very much the inspiration for us when we started InScribe. We recognize the kind of unique circumstances that these students have in terms of being very busy, often learning in a way that can be isolating when you're learning online, and maybe not having the experience to really understand how to navigate all the complexities of online learning. So we wanted to go after that. We said, if we can address some of these challenges, we think we can improve the trajectory for these students. And that's where InScribe came from. So we built InScribe as a virtual community platform. It creates a dynamic space where students can come anytime they want from anywhere to engage with peers, faculty, and staff. And when we think about it, excuse me, we are really building these communities for 3 measurable outcomes. Can we improve these students' sense of belonging and sense of peer connection? Can we, by extension, improve outcomes and persistence for these learners? And can we do all of this while actually reducing cost for the institutions that we work with? And that is very much the mission that we're on. And we're fortunate that we've been able to work with a number of amazing partners that have helped us kind of prove out these, let's say, hypotheses that we came to when we started the company. So just a few of the outcomes that we've seen. We did a great research study with Rio Salado College. I think we have a few individuals from that organization on the call today. At some point, Danielle will drop this study into the chat, but we did a really cool study around the impact of the communities on belonging and saw a significant increase in those measures from students after just a few weeks of participating in these spaces. We've also done a number of studies around things like outcomes and persistence. One of our big state institutions saw an 8.5% decrease in first-year DFW rates when they applied a community model. So that's an enormous change, both for the institution and the students that it impacts. Similarly, at a different institution, they measured things slightly differently, and they saw that students in the communities were twice as likely to persist in their learning and continue than those who did not. And so great outcomes for students achieving that goal. But if we did all of that and it was really expensive and really hard to implement and cost you a bunch of time and money, it wouldn't be worth it. It wouldn't work. So we also look at this efficiency measure. And there's a number of ways that we look at it, but here's one example where instructors using our tool for learning communities saw a huge decrease in the number of individual emails that they were getting from students. So by bringing the conversations into a shared space where everybody could see what was happening, they got hours and hours back in their week that they could now spend on much higher order activities. And we've replicated similar outcomes to this in different types of communities, with coaches, with advisors, so not just faculty. So that's a wonderful, I think, positive outcome for the institution and for the individuals, moderating these spaces. Any questions about that? And any questions pop up in the chat, Danielle?
Nope, I don't see any questions yet. We do have somebody that commented about working with adult learners and, balancing life while pursuing college. And that was actually my experience. So balancing family, full-time work. If you don't have somebody else that you're kind of working side by side with and somebody else to cheer you on, it can be kind of isolating. So I love all the statistics that you shared here. And thank you to everyone that took the time to introduce themselves in the chat.
Well, and thank you for that reminder, because this is a lot of macro stuff, right? Big trends, big outcomes. But we know that it also comes back to the individuals that we work with and that we impact. And so I think we'll have an opportunity to share a few of those examples today. But, having the opportunity to really transform the experience for an individual learner is incredibly powerful. I'm sure you all have had that experience, and getting to see that every day is incredibly meaningful for me and for the team that works here. So we mentioned adult learners, and we talked a little bit about kind of the demographics of that space. I think one of the other things that we tend to see in this population of students is a disproportionate number that come with like imposter syndrome, which seems odd, right? You think it as an adult, you've been around a little bit longer, you're more confident, but actually the opposite seems to be true. So you have these students who are coming in, maybe they don't have a network around them, they're learning at home on their own, or they're commuting to school. They got a lot of other stuff going on. And then on top of that, they're not actually sure that they can do this, And so if we don't get at all of those things as quickly as possible, the chances that that student is able to maintain and persist through their education are lower and lower. And so what a community does is it creates a very scalable, so cost-effective, but also authentic way to address those challenges that we just talked about. It's on demand, so it's there whenever students need it. If you're studying at Sunday at 2 a.m., your community is there. If you're studying Monday at noon, your community is there. It also brings students together in a place where they can actually see other people, so it's one thing to know that I have 30 other students in my class. It's a different thing to actually have conversations with them, understand where they're from. And then the third thing is it provides visibility for students. I mean, this is going to sound kind of odd, but it provides visibility into the challenges and worries that other students are facing. So when you get in there and you see like, oh, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this, or I'm not the only one that has this anxiety, that is a transformatively powerful experience that can lift up that individual and make the difference between them staying in school and succeeding or giving up. So when we think of these communities, they're obviously digital spaces, they're safe places for students to come and talk to each other. And then they're really designed as this knowledge repository. So it's not just transactional. You're not just one and done, but that conversation that you have becomes a core component of the community that other people can see and learn from and benefit from. And I think that's a big difference between how we approach this type of communication model and some of the other, technologies and platforms that are out there.
Katie, I think you said something that's super important. It's being a safe space, right? So when I think back on my journey, we use Facebook groups, I think, maybe some LinkedIn groups here and there. And more often than not, those spaces ended up becoming places for people to complain. And so what I love about InScribe is it is truly a safe space. And I know that you'll get into that a little bit in more detail, but can you maybe tell us a little bit about how these InScribe communities are different than social groups?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of reasons, but one of them is what I have up here, which is the InScribe communities are designed to be integrated directly into the workflow of your institution. So where your students are already going, the LMS, the portal, your app, you want to have access to the community there. That's critical for just engagement, right? You want to be in front of the students when they need you. But it's also a critical element of sort of telling your students that this is an extension of their learning experience. This is an extension of bringing themselves, to their education. So behavior is much, people behave in these spaces like they would if they were sitting in a classroom with others. They're very supportive, engaging, and positive about their interactions. We do have some tooling built into the community to also keep an eye on that. And so I'll show that in the demo, but it very rarely gets used. And the idea is much more around, bringing your authentic self to this space. I will also say the communities are not anonymous. So, students understand that whatever they say in these spaces, somebody at the institution will know that they said that. So that also, I think, kind of keeps people in a more positive light. So I mentioned the integration piece. Hopefully I'll have some time to show you at least the LMS integration today. This is actually just an example of it. The other thing that we do is we built, a native mobile app. So I mentioned access to the community is really critical. So if you've ever launched a community and then you're like, nobody came, it's like crickets in here. One of the key elements to think about is how are people accessing that? Because if it's too hard to get there, if it's set aside, if it's not deeply integrated, it's really hard to drive engagement. And the mobile app is a core component of that. We can just be in the student's back pocket. We can alert them, give them notifications right on their screen, draw them back into the community and let them know what's going on. So these types of integration and access are always top of mind for us. And then let's talk a little bit about, well, I was gonna show this, but then I was thinking about showing it in the demo. What time is it? Let me go through this quickly and then we'll see it again in the demo. Because these are real life examples. So we are what we call a human first technology enabled platform. We think that technology should be applied in service of helping humans do what they do best. So we don't want to replace human to human interaction. We want to enhance it. And these are some of the types of activities that we see in our communities that we think, can't be replicated by a conversation with a computer or with AI. So some examples would be, just meeting classmates, making new connections, finding people that live in your area, maybe finding people that have the same type of dog that you have. Those sort of small interactions add up to really helping students find their place and feel connected to the space. The other is really around that support piece. Certainly, we aren't attempting to replace the support that the institution provides to learners, but this is enhancing that. So not only when you, as a staff member or faculty, answer a student's question, do you get better reach with your answer by putting it in the community, but you also tap into all the other students who can come in and provide advice and answers and their own experiences, just a different lens on a lot of things than what somebody at the institution might bring to the table. Certainly the idea of, this is a little bit around the sort of imposter syndrome, building confidence, helping people know that they're not alone. We see this conversation every time we launch a community. Somebody comes in and says, I don't think I can do it. And the number of people that jump in immediately to say, yes, you can, let's get together is it's incredibly powerful. And then finally, so these are all student-facing activities, but we also, want to reinforce that communities are a great way for you to get information out. So when when institutions post things like events, announcements, key information in their community, the number of students that view that content, that we're told it's like 3 or 4 times what they think, the reach that they think they get when they just send it out through email or some other mechanism. Moreover, you can see the number of people who have viewed it, and you can actually click through there to see specifically who has looked at these activities. So a really powerful tool for the school as well in terms of information dissemination. Okay, with that, let's take a look at the platform itself. Oops. There we go. Okay, so you can see that, yes, Danielle?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Any questions that popped in that I should address before we jump in here?
Not at the moment.
Okay, great.
But you probably wanted longer to drink your drink there, and I didn't have time, so.
I can tell I'm talking too much when they start to get parched. So I'm going to focus today on what we call a peer-to-peer community. So this is a type of community that exists above the course, sort of outside of the course, usually brings students together across lots of different areas, maybe the entire institution. And it's really a place for them to just kind of talk about whatever they want to talk about. So these communities really get after things like belonging and student connection. But as I said, the community concepts can really be applied at all places along the student life cycle. So we have communities focused on admissions. We have these communities. We have a number of communities, if we have time, we'll jump in here, around classrooms or individual topics. And then an emerging number of communities for alumni as well. But for now, I'm going to focus here just to kind of give you a sense of what the capabilities are. So we've come into our community. We're in the peer-to-peer community in the InScribe organization. Key things to think about if you're launching a community. So we already talked about access. Make sure that you're meeting the students where they are. The next thing is about kind of engagement. So as soon as you have a student who comes to the community, you want to grab their attention right away and you want to get them involved. So we do that in a couple of ways. One is our onboarding workflow, where we kind of walk the student through what is this community for, what are the community norms, and then update your profile. And then we end by asking them to post something, usually an introduction into the community space. That first post is really important because once somebody's posted once, they're much more likely to come back and post again. The other way that you can draw people in is just on how you organize your community. So usually communities are organized by these topic areas, and you'll want to think about what are the topics that are going to resonate the most with my students. And you want to know the best way to figure that out? Ask some of your students. So we highly recommend, if you're building these communities, to include students in the design process. It works really well. And they also then feel a really strong sense of ownership over the space. So your engagement statistics will go up much faster. But you want these topics to be interesting, engaging, something to draw them in. And then the last thing we have are these channels. So these are like subgroups in your community. So if you know that you have groups of students that have particular backgrounds or identities, you might reflect them in these subgroups, and then students can explore the channels that are available, join the ones that are most interesting to them, and then kind of immediately get connected to people that they'll have that deeper relationship with. When a student comes into the community, they're usually coming for a couple of reasons. They might just be curious, right? So we talked about ways to capture that curiosity and translate it into action. They might also, the other main reason is they actually need something, right? So they're coming in and they actually need help with a certain initiative. So this is where that knowledge repository piece really comes into play. Because if something has already been addressed, we don't want that student to have to ask that question again. It takes, we don't want them to have to wait for an answer if the answer is already there, and we don't want someone to have to take the time to restate that answer. So, one of the things that, students often talk about, like just a really tangible example, are like APA citations. Nobody remembers how to do them. We're always repeating to students how to do it. So if you've got that addressed in your community, students can come in, search for that, find the answer they need, and move on. There's also more subtle sort of social things. So I'm studying late at night, I'm feeling kind of lonely. Maybe I want to look on how to join a study group. So I search for the, oh gosh, I can't talk and type at the same time. So maybe I search for that, and I can see oh, there's a couple of people that have already addressed this. So I click on this and I can see that somebody else is forming a study group. There's one that exists, and I can jump in and join them right here. So now I have solved my problem, connected to a whole group of people who had a similar challenge to me, and now established a set of peer relationships, all in essentially 3 clicks. So that's really powerful and meaningful. But not everything is going to be addressed in the community right away. So students can initiate new conversations. And this is really the heart of your product, where students are starting conversations, responding to each other, interacting. If I actually start a conversation and again, that has already been addressed in the community, Rosie, who's our little technology assistant, lives in our communities. She will actually pop up and start to recommend that content back to me. So it's almost like I'm searching, but I skip the search feature. So we interject that in a subtle way. But if that's not the case, I can create a new post and send it off here. A couple of important things to note. One is, obviously, I can bring in all kinds of cool features, images. I can also tag it to particular topics based on what the question is about. And then I also have control over how I appear in the community when this is posted. Now, remember, one of the important elements of your community is that it's safe and welcoming and draws in the most diverse set of participants possible. That's hard because you have some people who are nervous to join, right? They're anxious, they don't want to embarrass themselves. And so just having an asynchronous space already helps with that, because people can take their time to formulate what they want to say. We have students tell us all the time, I never raised my hand in class, I never spoke up on a Zoom, but I was the most active person in the InScribe community because I could take a minute to kind of organize my thoughts. But we also have this option where if I'm still nervous, I can post anonymously. So my fellow students wouldn't know who I was. You as a moderator would still know who that person is. or I could post privately just to the moderators. So we're lowering the barrier to participation. Just get you in, get you started, so you can start to see the real value of the space. So I post this question, an alert goes out to all the members of the community, letting them know there's a new post, here's the content of the post, and kind of encouraging them to jump back in and interact. So those notifications go out through email, and they also go out through the mobile app, and they're totally customizable. So every student can go in and adjust, how often do I want to hear about something? Maybe I don't want to hear about it at all. So they're not overwhelmed, and they really have control over that process. But it is really important, these notifications, because students aren't just sitting in their community waiting for something to happen, and neither are you, or should you be. So the system really needs to be a participant in this process, letting you know what's happening, what's a priority, and kind of drawing you back in to participate when it's appropriate. All right, Danielle, let me pause. Questions, comments?
Yeah, we had a question come to me directly. Can you share suggestions on how to get students to participate?
Yes. So we talked about proximity. We talked about the onboarding process. We talked about reflecting in the community what your students are actually going to care about and find value in. And then we have one other kind of tip and technique that we use to get and then I guess a third one that may be a little bit obvious is just letting students know that it exists. Just posting it and walking away probably isn't going to get it done. So, some kind of communication or campaign to celebrate the launch of the community, let people know that it's there. We have all kinds of templates to help with that process. But then the last sort of tip I have is to model the behavior in the community that you want students to see. And one way you can do that is, first of all, you put a little bit of content in the community before students get there. And then once the community is launched, it's usually a good idea to have a couple of common questions in reserve and then post those. Have a student, that's part of the design team or somebody post those in the first week of the community. So it's hard to be the first one to communicate, but once other students see how the community is being used, that people are using it, that will draw them in and get them active.
To add to that, so this question is specifically about receiving views. So, hey, lots and lots of views, right? But we're not seeing a lot of participation and responses. Do you have any suggestions on how to get people to respond to each other?
Yes. So at the risk of offending everybody on this webinar, the truth is students don't necessarily want to talk to you. They want to talk to each other. Now, that's not, I would say, not the case in academic and learning communities. Here, we see a lot of engagement from students and a lot of interaction between students and faculty and student and TAs. But in these spaces where it's really about peer-to-peer, the best thing that an institution can do is kind of stay out of the way. Because what we find is if the administrators are posting or the staff are posting a lot, the students start to feel like it's not actually my space, it's your space to communicate to me. And they will back off from talking to each other. And it's not because they're mad or upset, it's just that they've started to interpret the space as something other than what you have envisioned it to be. So again, we have a lot of recommendations and best practices around that. We think that can help. If you're already an InScribe partner and you're kind of going through this, definitely reach out to us because I think we can help you kind of relaunch the community and more in line with the goals that you have around engagement.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so quickly, because we probably will start to run out of time, we have a resources area. So if you have supplemental videos and content, you can use the resources area to post them. This is generally reserved for the moderators. So think about it as a more curated set of assets that you want your community members to have access to. And then the last area is our live events feature. So I know I just got done telling you that if you have a peer community, you should stay out of it. There is an exception to that, which is students love to know when there are events taking place at the school. And a lot of times what we hear from adult learners or online students is they miss that. They feel left out. They hear about things that have happened and they didn't know it was happening. So kind of centralizing that in a space like this is a really good idea, and you will see a significant increase in the number of people attending your live events simply by posting them and promoting them in your community. We see that over and over and over again with our partners. And here are just a few examples of what they might be. Getting the new students together, bringing in a guest speaker, in a learning community, having a study session or an office hours event. It doesn't have to be, super fancy, but it can have a lot of impact. And you can see here, there's a live event happening right now. And so we advertise that right on the homepage and draw people in. But the way it works is when you create a live session, you just let where do you want to publish it, and then you let us know what it's about, give it a time and a duration, and then add in whatever meeting tool you want to use. So Zoom, Teams, InSpace, whatever is your preferred, you can use it in this area. And then you post it. Now a notification goes out to all your community members. It includes the ability to add it to their calendar, which is great. But the best thing is right before the event goes live, another notification goes out letting people know and giving them the opportunity to click right through and join the event. And I think that's a lot of what drives those high levels of attendance. But the other cool thing is when you have something posted in here, you open it up to become a two-way conversation. So before the event, people can come in and give you feedback, ask questions, say, I hope we cover this. If they miss the event, you can put the recording here so they can watch it. And maybe ask a follow-up question. So they're not missing out on these synchronous opportunities just because they couldn't be there at that time, which we know is something that's really hard for this population of learners. Should I pause, Danielle, or keep going?
Just a quick question. This didn't come in the chat. I'm just going to propose it. Did you mention anything about who our moderators are? I know it really varies on what type of community the institution has. However, you've mentioned moderators quite a few times, and I want to make sure that we clarify that.
That is thank you for requesting that clarification. So you're right. The moderators come from your institution. And whoever moderates the space, it's up to you, but it kind of is defined by the type of space you have. So in these peer communities, the moderators are usually someone from the student success organization, someone from the coaching team or advising team. In the learning communities or the academic communities, moderators are usually faculty or TA or TAs, sometimes tutors, people from the tutoring organization. But really, it's like who would be answering these questions anyway at your institution? And let's bring them into this space because they're the one that's going to benefit the most from the efficiencies and the insights that they get out of these spaces. One other thing I want to talk about here, because we do get the question often, like, how do I keep an eye on what's happening in the space? How do I make sure that students are behaving themselves, being nice, and as we said earlier, that very rarely is an issue, especially the sort of being nice thing. But there are times we see when we'll see a post come in and we'll be like, that's something that somebody probably wants to take care of or prioritize. And so we do a couple of things around that. One is we have a list of keywords. So if one of those keywords ever appears, the system will flag it and let you know. And that's customizable, so you can add and remove words from that list. The more interesting thing we do is that we run the conversations through a sentiment API. And that is measuring the emotion of the conversation. And so in combination, what we can often do is, if somebody is really having a bad day or kind of getting to the end of their rope, the system will automatically identify that. And Rosie will escalate that post to you. So the student wouldn't see this flag. But Rosie's essentially letting you know, hey, I think that this is a post or a student that needs more immediate attention. We actually had an example just a week ago where, a student was really talking about, struggling, feeling down, feeling like it was very similar to what we see here, feeling like they probably were not going to finish the degree. And it allowed that individual's coach, in this case, to immediately reach out to that student, get them on the phone, kind of talk through with them what was needed, and essentially connect them with additional resources that could help that student through what their challenge. Without the community, this coach may never have known the student was struggling with that, and that would have been one more student lost. So this is really the goal of this feature, was How do we help you prioritize and identify issues and challenges? Okay, I'm just going to keep going unless you have some other questions you would like me to talk about.
Keep on going. We have about 10 minutes.
Awesome. So as you might expect, we have an administrative area where you can see all the members of your community, what they've been up to. I can click into an individual user and see their activity. This is also where you see the reputation system kind of showcased in our platform. So we want to give people credit for good activity and being a good citizen in the community. And so they can earn points and essentially level up around these three areas. How much am I contributing? How much am I starting in terms of conversations, and what's the impact of my conversations? Where am I contributing to other people's needs and helping to support them? And am I consuming the content that's provided for me? Don't forget about this role in the community. People who are listeners, you know, the lurker, they are a really important component of the space. And they may never say anything in your community. That does not mean that they didn't get a ton of value out of what they're seeing and learning. So we really want to acknowledge that. This is all customizable. You can change the number of points. This is also where we just released gradebook integration. So if you wanted to give like credit for students for their participation in InScribe, you can tie these reputation points back to the gradebook. You wouldn't necessarily do that in a peer community, but in a learning community, you might do that. So if you're interested in learning more about that, let me know. And then in the community admin area, you can also see what's happening in your space. So what's going on day to day, who's doing what. Obviously in demo communities, these graphs are a little sad, but in fact, I should get some good pictures and put them in the PowerPoint. But you can keep an eye on kind of what's the trends and the health of your community, who's really active, what conversations are most popular. You can export this data if you want to combine it with data from other systems. And then if you really want to do deep research on what's happening in your community spaces, all of this data is available through API, as well as a much larger data set of learning events that we track. So most of our partners, many of our partners use this, but a lot of them also will take that data export, put it in their data lake, and then now they can combine it with SIS information, courseware, et cetera. So just keep in mind if that's important to you, that's definitely something that we can do. Okay, so I am going to.
Hey, Katie, there is a quick question in
Yeah,
the chat,
sure.
and I assume it's a partner by the way it's positioned. It did come directly to me. How do I access the onboarding for the community? This person wants to see the process that the students are going through. So like I guess once you've got in there the first time, does the onboarding portion of this disappear?
Yeah, once you've dismissed it, it won't pop back up again for obvious reasons. We don't want to like keep putting that in front of the student. But if you've dismissed it, but you want it to come back, just ping our customer support team and they can reactivate it for you. I don't think you can reactivate it for yourself. So let us know and we can turn that back on for you. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah. Okay.
So really quickly, because I think this is a nice segue to then look at the LMS integration, I'm just going to show you high level what a different type of community might look like. So here we have peer community above the classroom, usually come one, come all. Here we have a classroom that is tied to a particular course. So college algebra, it's going to be limited to just the students taking that course. Or in some cases, if you have 5 sections of college algebra, they might all share a community together. So the students across 5 courses are in the community. That's kind of up to you and your design. But you can see that the setup is very similar. You know, topics are probably going to be tied to the curriculum, along with maybe a social space where students can introduce themselves, you know, exchange math memes, silly stuff like that. You have all of the same tool sets in terms of, you know, the flagging, understanding when students are getting really frustrated or in need of additional assistance. You can also host live events in these spaces. Usually that would be office hours, study groups. You can share supplemental resources. So I want to make sure we're thinking about the idea of community building can happen in lots of different places. You don't have to tackle all the use cases at once. Usually when we partner with an institution, they have one area that they're really focused on starting with. But just know that the same platform can then be rolled out across lots of different areas. So that's a benefit for your students because it's a really unified experience for them. It's a benefit for you because you have one tool that you have to support. And it also aligns, our pricing model aligns really nicely with that, which is, we don't charge you additional money for additional communities. It's really a student-based pricing model. And so it can be very cost effective to bring InScribe in and then have it be able to apply in all these different areas. This is where the LMS integration really will make sense. So again, think about like if you have a portal, if you have a website, an app, we can do integrations there as well. The LMS tends to be very common, as you might imagine. And here you can have lots of different places to integrate. Usually what you would do is put it in the left-hand navigation and then possibly have links to the community within maybe each of the weeks or the modules of the course. Two really cool things you can do from the LMS. One is you can load the community in our embedded homepage. So rather than jumping out to a new tab, you keep them in the context of the learning here. Really, you can do everything here that you would do on that homepage. So it's just a nice sort of unifying experience for the student. The other thing you can do is you can filter your links to go to a specific topic automatically. So if you're in week 1 studying quadratic functions, when I click over to InScribe, it's going to automatically take me to that topic area. So everything I see here is related to what I'm doing in school, doing that week. Just really simplifying things for the student. So again, if you have any questions about the LMS integration or other integrations, let us know. And with that, I think we only have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to jump back here and just say, any last questions, please post them. If you had any takeaway from the session today, I hope it's that, community is very powerful. A very simple implementation can have an outsized impact for your students. And it's definitely a place where you have the ability to impact that experience across lots of different areas at your school or university. So if you're interested in learning more, we've used Slido a couple of times. If you just follow this QR code, it will take you to this Slido. You can put in your name and contact information, and Fred or myself will reach out to you and kind of learn more about what you're up to and give you the information that you need. A customized demo, I think, is usually really helpful in this context to kind of reflect back how the communities would work in your specific use case. And other than that, Danielle, if you have my contact information and want to drop it in the chat, I love to just connect with people and learn what you're doing. But even if you're not at all interested in InScribe, I would love to connect with you. So easiest way to do that with me is through LinkedIn. Go to my LinkedIn and find me and send me a request, and we can continue to collaborate in the future. Thank you guys so much for spending time with us today.